Welding thin material can sometimes be a little stressful. From managing heat input to balancing weld penetration versus having to deal with a blowout, there's just a lot to keep up with when you care about both the function and the aesthetics of the panel. I'm no pro, but I've ruined enough material to know what happens when you don't come at these panels with a plan, so here's mine.
Hey y'all. So we're going to do some welding today and blending to make these two long seams, really long, like 20 inches or so, on a piece of sheet metal. We're going to weld, blend, and make those smooth, like just going to make them disappear into the panel. I'm not going to call this warp-free welding, but I'm going to say it's low warp welding. And when you have access to both sides of the panel, we can make it seem like it's one piece of material with just a little bit of time and some of the right tools. Top of the list is a couple of settings on the welder. I'll go through torch and material, but first I'm using 035 filler rod, really pretty thin. You could get away with 045, but this 035 just melts real nicely. Second, my torch, I'm using a number 8 lens with a number 8 cup with a gas lens. This is all from Michael Furrick, and this variable control right here on the torch. Settings on the welder are pretty straightforward. I've just got it on 50 amp straight current. I'm flowing a little bit more gas than normal than you would with a number 8. I'm flowing like about 25-ish cubic feet per hour. And I've got a nice post flow, 10 seconds. Number 8 on a cup's a little bit bigger than you would normally use because I want really good coverage. I did some earlier welding with number 6 and it just wasn't quite enough. This is exactly right. You don't need the big cup, you just need a number 8 with a little bit of stick out. And then last detail that you can see up here is I've done a lot to prep this material. I have a bunch of tacks on here, but everything is clean side to side, right? There's no E-coat or anything. I've made sure that it's all nice and clean. And then I am using some copper backers that I pick up like little copper stock like this, either from my local metal shop or you can even order them on Amazon. If they're nice and thin like this, you can make it conform to the shape that's in there. And then a couple of big clamps to hold them in place. Really nice to keep the material together.
I'm welding about an inch or two at a time and allowing the full argon post flow at the end of each weld. That broad convex profile of the solidified weld is a leading indicator that your settings and travel speed and technique are in range for the panel. Now notice the heat affected zone, that little blue discolored area on either side of the weld, stays pretty tight and roughly the same size as the number 8 gas cup. That is a lagging indicator that the panel is managing the heat load pretty well. The back of the panel will be scaled from heat, but shouldn't have any blowouts or pockets. Those come from too much heat input, and I had a few, but just filled them with silicon bronze. It's not super critical here since we're going to stretch the panel later, but do keep in mind that a weld seam contracts in the direction of travel. I remember welding this section of the panel and using that as a part of my technique to close a little modest gap toward the edge. This is all still pretty warm, but what you can see, I'll have to shoot from another angle so you guys can see it, but pretty flat as they get closer together, right? There's a lot of heat input that's like right next to each other, so that's where you've got the most deformation. And I'd say there's like an 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16 dip from here to here. Man, an 1/8 inch is not going to be a big deal. We pulled out this flat spot with bossing mallets and an English wheel. So this little 1/8 inch, all we got to really do to make this thing work well is to dress down the weld with some body hammers, get it flat enough so that we don't, ding up the anvils on the English wheel. The order of operations for getting the weld blended down has lots of flexibility. I mix and match depending on whatever the panel needs at any given moment. For this, I would end up doing some light grinding of the weld, and while the lower section of the patch responded to the dead blow, the upper part needed really strong high crown persuasion directly over wood. That's really not surprising since it's the area of the panel with the most heat input and resulting shrink. When the weld profile is high, I blend it down to just proud of the surrounding work using an abrasive or the rasp, or both. The rasp is basically a really coarse half-round metal file. Here, it cuts the weld down even farther, but at a slower pace than an abrasive, so there's a lot more control. Back at the shop bag, I'm working this panel on either side of the weld to get this ready for the English wheel. tell you, working down welds with the English wheel is a frustrating chore, but it's an extremely effective tool for the job. Just like we did last time, I start off with light pressure and a medium crown. I'm working narrowly alongside the weld, just trying to get the material stretched evenly. While it starts a bit frustrating, it really didn't take too long or too many back and forths to see progress. Then, back to the rasp. The weld is getting worked down, but I'm also getting into the areas on either side. I'm actually being pretty gentle to avoid thinning the material too much. As one of my weld teachers said, it is easy to grind away material, but sure is tough to put it back. My dad even stopped by to check out progress. And what I'm describing to y'all now, I didn't quite have words and sentences for at that time.
How are your eye work? What are you looking to do other than...
So, take a look.
At each of these steps, I am responding to what I'm seeing the material do. When I want to raise the shrunken part of the patch, I bump it with the mallet or high crown and smooth it with the English wheel. I work the panel in parallel to the weld and then across it. The panel responds and so do I, rotating through and repeating the processes as needed. The point here is to make small, steady moves. No one process gets it all done. So, take your time, work the problem, luxuriate in the process. Oh, and just when you think, hey, look, he's using the dual action sander, this must be the end, the panel's done, bam, episode over. Nope. There are still minor imperfections hiding in the surface of the wheelhouse. They're hard to see, but easy to feel, and would show up as soon as I put on a coat of black paint. What they cannot hide from is layout fluid and a file. Just a little light file work shows me the remaining high and low spots, and they're very minor, and they don't need much more than some time on the English wheel and final blending. The big, double-cut file blends out the final waves and the panel is all but done. To me, repeating this series of steps is what separates good work from what I'll call my very best effort. Now the DA means we're done.
So I'm pretty happy with that. I spent several nights and weekends through the week working that down. I did all that welding work on a Sunday evening. You know, just wherever I could find like an hour and a half to 2 hours, I would come out here and work on the English wheel, trying to get everything, you know, smoothed down. Ticket to that was making sure that wherever I dropped off or left at the end of one day, I knew exactly where to pick up the next day. even if that meant stopping just a little bit early, knowing exactly where to begin saves a bunch of time. So all in all, I'm like I said, I'm pleased with how this turned out. I think I'm gonna go hit it with the flat anvil on this part to maybe get this smoothed a little bit, as you can see. And I'll probably end up doing it on this one too. So those little fine-tuning things still remain, but the point is just to take your time, right? Invest the time to be able to pay attention to what the metal is telling you and then respond and get it, kind of coax it to what you want it to do. Speaking of what I want to do, the next thing that I've got to do is flange this. So that's why there's this plywood spacer right here, is to make sure that I am able to mark and outline wherever, where the flange is going to go. It'll be just like this one over here. And I don't know if y'all saw, but there's an axle housing right over there. And maybe I'll get around to mocking up the rear suspension. All the suspension parts are here. They're ready to be, start getting mocked up. Got a few other little odds and ends that I want to do before getting to that. But when it happens, y'all will see it. So until then, I appreciate y'all being here, and take good care, all right?